and even just an understanding of I am not my thoughts. And I can be aware of my thoughts, and I can be aware of my reactions and my emotions, but that I don't need any of this to define me. And I think these psychedelic tools they're beautiful catalysts for that level of awareness.
What is up, my beautiful people? Welcome to the Trip Sitting Podcast, where we explore what it means to be human. I am your host, Cam Leeds, and on this episode, we have Matt Zemon, who is the author of Psychedelics for Everybody, and somebody that I was able to really bond with when I first met him, and so I was really excited to get him on the podcast and continue our conversation together. We get really deep really quick, and he's just a super nice and genuine and authentic person. Before we get started, this episode is sponsored by Mushmore. Mushmore unlocks its members' full potential through the power of microdosing. And more than that, they are a really amazing community. I'm personally part of the community as well, and I've actually been part of the community for over a year at this point, which is why I'm really excited to be able to actually represent them on this podcast. Join their Telegram channel, and you can hear from a lot of their members about how they microdose, and you can get advice and just hear really amazing stories that people have been able to just like overcome a lot of things through the power of microdosing. And Mushmore just does an amazing job of cultivating that community that helps with that healing process. And also too, they have some absolutely amazing microdosing products. They have so many different options to choose from, so you know your dose. You could stack it with all these different other functional mushroom products, and I really can't say enough amazing things about it. So be sure to join their Telegram to learn more and see how to get those products. And then you can also check out the footnotes of this podcast if you want to join. Before we start to, make sure you're following Trip Sitting on whatever podcast streaming platform you're listening to this on, and then also make sure you're following us on social media at tripsitting.blog. That's it. Here's Matt.
Isn't it kind of wild that here you are doing this? Like 5 years ago, can you imagine yourself starting a discussion that you're recording with a guiding a meditation?
No, not at all. I that specifically, I think the guiding the meditation myself part would probably be the most unbelievable of all of it. I'm trying to think of when I first tried meditating, and I think it was in 2020 when I just started working remotely, of course, because that was right at the beginning of COVID. And it was like a kind of high stress, high pressure sales job, doing software sales. And I was just like, again, stressed, and I needed to find a way to not be stressed. And of course, this is like the height of like, mindfulness for productivity and in the workplace and all that. So like I downloaded the Calm app or one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And did it pretty consistently for a decent amount of time, but I never felt like I actually got anything out of it. Like I never felt like it truly helped. I think I was just sitting there for, 10, 15 minutes, not knowing how to actually like dissociate from my thoughts. Like I was just thinking, like it was just 10 minutes of just thinking time, but like it was never truly like being there and being present. And so then I stopped after a while. And then it wasn't until probably about a little over a year ago now, once I came back from my ayahuasca retreat, that I naturally was like, oh shit, like I get this now. now I know what this is about. And then I started meditating very regularly.
It's lovely when psychedelics, whether it's done in a spiritual context like you did with an ayahuasca retreat or even ketamine, can give people something to point to for meditation, and even just an understanding of I am not my thoughts. And I can be aware of my thoughts, and I can be aware of my reactions and my emotions, but that I don't need any of this to define me. And I think these psychedelic tools they're beautiful catalysts for that level of awareness. And it sounds like that it had that impact on you.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely did. And like that's a really good way of describing it, of me truly realizing for the first time that like I am not my thoughts. Like I think it's definitely happened during subsequent trips, because I was recreationally using
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics already for, at least a couple of years back then. But it never really occurred to me, like that specific thought that, oh, I could really do this without being on psychedelics. I didn't realize that meditation was kind of like the gateway to that.
What was it that was there a teacher you were working with, or was it that particular ceremony itself, or what do you think caused the switch in your mind, or was it just time?
I think time definitely had a lot to do with it. And like I think I was just a lot more intentional in general with my life at that point. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was really on a mission to stop living the way that I was, which I didn't really even know what it was about the way that I was living that felt so unaligned, but I knew that I was not living in alignment with myself and doing what I wanted to do. I knew that if I kept doing the same things, it was just going to lead me down a path of just like depression. And I knew I wanted to change that. So it was just intentionally trying to do different things to get out of that. And in the ayahuasca ceremony, I guess the second ceremony, which is really really powerful for me, which was really really difficult for most of it. But it wasn't until the end that one of the facilitators was like, "Why don't you just sit with the pain that you have right
Mm.
now, rather than trying to purge it out of you? Why don't you just get to know it and get comfortable with it and just be there with it?" And like it was through that process of just sitting and allowing the pain to be there. Like there was just like terrible, terrible stomach pain that I was going through, and I just wanted it to end the entire
Mm.
ceremony. But once I allowed the pain to be there and started questioning it and got curious without trying to judge it or change it anyways, it slowly, slowly let up. And all these emotions and all these memories came up during it. And I was actually then finally able to purge all of that out. But like that process there of just sitting with it without judgment, without trying to do anything, like that was the key.
That's the certainly the difference between a good facilitator and a not good facilitator is knowing when to comment, when to
Hmm.
provide instruction, when to leave you alone. And they and it sounds like this particular facilitator wasn't trying to tell you how to shape your what your experience meant, but was really
No.
inviting you to just experience your experience. And that
Yeah.
sounds beautiful. Go back.
And
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
so no, I was gonna say, and also they did a really good job of waiting until I was really
Mm-hmm.
really tough, because they could have told me that hours before and that probably would have helped. But like the fact that I had to sit there going through the pain, judging the pain for as long as I did, I think was honestly also like very, very crucial to that experience, and why it's still, I mean, why I can still remember it so, so vividly a year and a half later.
That's incredible. So go back in time. Was there a clarifying moment where you hit for you whatever I don't know what the right term is, where you hit bottom, where you said, I don't want to live like this anymore, that then led to wanting to change your life? Was there a single incident that was, or is it just a building up, or what happened?
It was definitely like a slow building up, um, of, just like I graduated from college. I was working for a startup. I was always super into tech startups, and like my goal was to eventually have my own tech startup and
Mm-hmm.
sell it for $1 billion, and then just have a bunch of money and not be able to give a shit about anything in the world. That was my genuine dream. I was making a pretty decent amount of money right after college, like more than a lot of my peers. And like that felt good, but I always thought that that was gonna, help fill the gap, and it didn't. I was in this perpetual cycle of I work really hard, I don't like my job, and then on the weekends I go out and get really, really drunk with all my friends, and then I only have 2 days of that, and then I have to do it all again on Monday through Friday. And I didn't get a lot of time off, and it just wasn't
Mm.
fulfilling in any way. And I mean, I think scared of truly stepping out of that, just because like I didn't know what else there was. Like this was the way that I was kind of taught. Like you go to college, you get a job, you work 9 to 5, you work your way up, or you become an entrepreneur, specifically with a tech startup, and somehow grow that, and then life is great. And so yeah, it just wasn't happening the way that I wanted to, and the people that I was surrounding myself with also were not asking the big questions either. They were people that are also stuck in this same exact loop. And something I just knew something had to change. And once I had heard about ayahuasca, which was actually at the beginning of COVID,
Mm.
I had just been thinking about it, and it just kept coming up until finally I got a new job at a different tech startup, still doing sales at the beginning of 2022. But I knew that me getting that job was going to be my way of saying, okay, I'm getting this job. I told my boss immediately, at some point this year in 2022, I'm going to take 2 weeks off and go to Peru. That's it. I had no idea where I was going to go at that time. I had no idea when the trip was going to take place, but I told
Mm.
my new boss, I'm like, I will be taking 2 weeks off to go to Peru. Know that as you hire me right now. And so that was my way of really speaking that into existence and being like, okay, now I have to do this. I've got somebody else involved and I have permission to do it, which was a big thing as well. But Matt, you do a really, really good job of interviewing me. This is my podcast, and I want to talk about you.
I was about to pick on you and say, so weren't you making money in college? And weren't you already an entrepreneur? And
I was selling cocaine in college, so I don't.
But that's making money and being an entrepreneur. It's
True,
just
it
a
is.
different. It's not the path that all of us took while we were in college. It's not
No.
working in the as a I don't know, providing writing skills in the lab or
Yeah.
working in the food court. No,
I was providing something else for my fellow peers,
there you go.
which was also not fulfilling, but it got me through college. It was a lot of fun. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't.
Yeah.
But Matt, let me just give some context here. We met at Wonderland, and it was the last night Sophie introduced me to you, and we ended up talking that last night for probably at least like 2 hours, like just you and me we're in conversation. And it was just a really, really great conversation. I was thinking about this earlier today. I don't remember all of what we talked about. I remember a lot. Like, we talked about our families, what we do, how we got into this. I don't remember all your answers, but it made me think of this quote of, you don't always remember what people say to you, but you remember how people made you feel.
Hmm.
And I just remember the feeling while talking to you was a feeling of safety, a feeling of genuine love, and just true like authenticity. And so that's what I wanted to share with you, was that was just such a great feeling. And I'm very, very grateful for that time that we had, and that we got to meet each other.
Cam, I feel the same way. I feel like I was just reflecting back who you are, and just thoroughly enjoyed connecting with you. I mean, we don't so often when we meet people, especially in those types of settings, it's just kind of high level discussion. And I mean, Sophie's an amazing human, period. So anybody she trusts is a good starting point. But we dove deep quickly, and you were vulnerable and you were open, and we just had a real conversation. And it was one of the highlights of that whole Wonderland experience for me. It was that discussion with you. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate following up here a few months later and super curious what's going on in your life. But I can wait on that.
I mean, I wanna hear about everything that you've been up to as well. And so for people that don't know, you are okay. I was looking at this. Are you the author or the editor, or is that the same thing of Psychedelics for Everyone?
It's a technicality and term. So
Okay.
I'm technically both the author and editor. However, I did not write all of Psychedelics for Everyone. I wrote some personal stories. I wrote some of the chapters, but then we hired people who were more knowledgeable than me on different compounds, and then hired medical experts to review their work, because I wanted to have a book that was trustworthy and but yet written for people with not a scientific background. So that's really what Psychedelics for Everyone is about, that you can read it and you can understand whether maybe you don't want to personally take a psychedelic, and that's okay. Maybe it's for someone, you're reading it because of someone you love, or maybe you're reading it just to have information so that you have a different perspective going into an election. That's all okay. And this book is accessible, and I wanted to have kind of checks and balances on the statements made, and then also have the references. If you are a geeky person like I am, and you want to go say, well, what exactly does the study say? All those references are in there, and you can go find out yourself.
Yeah, that's that's really cool, and I actually really like the fact that one, you're willing to admit that you didn't write the whole thing, because I know a lot of people that simply like won't admit that. Like when they create a book, you know, people that use ghostwriters and stuff, they still take all the credit for it. So that's really cool of you that um, that you are willing to admit that there are things that you don't know and that you wanted other people's help to put those things in the book that you still wanted there. And you know, I know that that might just be like a little thing to you, but um, you're setting a very, very good example for people on how to do things correctly. So thank you for that. And I want to start with what inspired you to even write that book in the first, or you know, begin that project in the first place.
So after my first experience was mind blowing. Unlike you, I did not do psychedelics in college. I did not do psychedelics in my 30s. It was well into my 40s when I had my first experience, and I just couldn't believe how beautiful and powerful and transformative that experience was. Um, and coming out of it, I started looking for more information, and there's a lot of information online, but I was like, I don't know. Some of it was just too technical. I don't know what this means. And others was too woo woo. I was like, I don't know what that means. I ended up going back to school to get a master's in psychology and neuroscience so that I could read the technical papers and understand how is science backing up what I at that point felt like I knew. Um, and then I felt like, you know what? It shouldn't be this hard to find information that's accessible. So yeah, that was my goal, is let's do this in a way that anyone can read it. Um, it'll have some stories that will hopefully resonate with people. It'll have some research. It won't pull punches. So I love microdosing, something I feel very strongly about. And in the book, I talk about how the research is split. There's some of the research that this is placebo, others that say, yeah, it actually does these things. But I wanted all that to be in there so that people can make whatever decision they want to make. And as the years have gone by now, I'm even more. I don't psychedelics. No, not everyone should take a psychedelic, and nor do I want to tell you whether you should take a psychedelic. What I do want to be is a trusted sounding board that we can talk about it. We can talk about the risks. We can talk about the potential rewards, and then you can make whatever decisions right for you. And if you choose to do one, great. If you choose not to do one, great. But I want it's everybody's individual choice.
I think that's why we get along so well, is because that's also like my exact take on it. Like I absolutely do not think everybody should take psychedelics, but I do think that everybody should have access to the proper information and proper education surrounding not just these substances, but also all of the other drugs that are so common in society that we don't really talk about, like including caffeine and alcohol and even fucking Advil, like when you have a headache. Like, you know, they're nobody really thinks too hard about those substances that we're putting in our body just because they're so normalized, but there's also not education around them. And so psychedelics specifically, though, I think the education has been uh, skewed
To say the least. Yes,
based
if there
on
has.
certain agendas that certain groups have out there. So I think that's why it's important to focus on that. Um, but you're right. Like something that I've heard you talk about before is like they're not for everybody, but like you might have a friend that's interested, or a family member, or somebody that you know that can be helped or has been affected by these substances, and so it's important for you to be educated for those people's sakes as well.
Absolutely. And when we talk about psychedelics, I mean, over and over, I say these aren't a cure for anything. These are a catalyst. But the conversation really is, it's only a little bit about psychedelics. It's much more about mental health and spirituality and consciousness and who am I and what stories have I wrapped myself around that's causing me to feel more depression or more anxiety or to behave in ways that aren't aligned with who I really am.
Hmm.
And psychedelics gives us a chance to kind of see through all that. Um, and then to potentially change our behavior and change the way we think. And that can really radically change somebody's life for the better. You
So I
talked
know
about
that.
access to information. I just want to also just stick on that access term because it's so important. It's just the access to the medicine, and that there are three ways in America that people access. There's some that want a medical model. They want to be greeted by someone in a white coat and be prescribed a psychedelic and be given a diagnosis, and that's beautiful, and that should be allowed. And there are people who say, you know what, I don't want to do that. I want to do this as a spiritual connection with my sacred, whatever that is to me. And I want to be able to do this work at whatever frequency is important to me with a community. And I'd like to do it with in conjunction with medical best practices, but it's a sacred process for me. And that there's, I don't know, somewhere between 200 and 2,000 psychedelic churches in America who believe under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that they should have the right to access these medicines for that purpose. Beautiful. So that's a second bucket. And then the third is the decriminalization bucket. And that's really split in half. There are some people who need a decriminalization because they want medical psychedelics, but they can't afford it.
Hmm.
So decriminalization for them is super important. And there's others that do choose to use this recreationally and use psychedelics because they just want to. And they're an adult in America and they want to put nature in their body. And I think that needs to be allowed because we don't know how or when a transformative experience is going to happen. And it can happen in any of these models and it can happen in none of these models. It's okay. But I think all the access in any of these points are important. And we need to have candid discussions as a society of these aren't safe, nothing's safe, but the
Hmm.
relative risk of these drugs compared to drugs that are illegal are night and day. Dr. David Nutt has his harm to self, harm to others study, where he said, let's look at alcohol. It's a 72 on his chart. Let's look at tobacco. Let's look at, and then let's compare that to mushrooms, which are 6, and LSD and a 7, and MDMA a 9. So
Hmm.
are there risks? Yes. Almost 200 people die of acetaminophen in America every year. There are risks with all these drugs, but relatively, these drugs are reduced risk. And that discussion needs to happen, and people need that information so that they can change the way we access these medicines in America.
Hmm. So what was it that changed your mind, that like gave you the want to experience this for yourself? Like did something happen in your life where you're finally like, oh, I think I'm ready for this, or what was it?
No, I had friends who had actually hired a guide and said, "Why don't you do this with us?" I was like, "I don't think so. I'm fine." Like,
Hmm.
no, you're not fine. You love to learn. This is a chance to learn in a deep way about yourself. And in that very first journey, I could see just how not fine I was about so many things. And
That
yeah,
your
I mean,
friends had no idea what they were creating.
they did not know what they were creating. I was actually just with one of them this past week, and we were laughing about, oh my goodness, what a difference and a journey this has been since that first experience. But yeah, I didn't know the questions to ask. I didn't know what the possibility was. So I knew kind of what my low end of my emotional scale was. When my mom died, I was 22, and that was a couple years after my father died, a couple years after my grandmother, a couple years after I lost everybody, or so many people in like a 5-year window. I knew what the low end felt like. And I thought, I've been married now. This will be my 20, we'll have a 25th wedding anniversary this year. I have 2 beautiful children. I thought I knew what the high end of my emotional register was. I was just wrong. I didn't know what was possible. And I didn't know that I could feel so radically different on the inside. And then that could carry into kind of everything, every interaction, every conversation. And I love this. It's beautiful, but I just didn't know it was possible. So that's, again, you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't know a lot. And I still don't know a lot, but
Hmm.
I know more than I did.
So what were you doing career wise while you know when you had that experience that made you then really radically shift.
Radically shift. Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur forever. So I've built a bunch of businesses. I've sold some businesses. At that point, I had a very geeky billing and call center business that focused on the cable industry. I still actually own that business, but I do very, very, very little in that space anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not, I'm not interested in that. But it does provide for the family, and that's amazing. And just that's just kind of the way it worked out. But so I was doing that kind of work, scaling businesses, for making money for the sake of money. And one of the big realizations was I have hit so many goals that I had made for myself, and within, I don't know, hours or days of hitting a goal, I just moved the goalpost, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
never satisfied with these. So at one point, it's like, oh, once I have a building with my company's name on, I'll be satisfied. Or once I have, I don't know, 100 employees, 200 employees, 500 employees, I'll be satisfied. Never satisfied. Um, it was all kind of shallow goals. And now I know that I'm fine as is. It's all good. And then what I choose to do to provide resources so I can eat and shelter and provide for the people I love is I can do the same practice in that work as I do in this other work. And I love that. And still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like and how do I add value into this particular space, and how do I do this with intentionality that I don't know. I'm not better than anybody, but I can I can use the skills that I have to do this work. And I'm trying to figure out exactly what that looks like. So part of it's providing information. Part of it is running this, is being a part of this entheogenic or psychedelic church that I
Sacred
love.
Path.
Sacred Path. Yeah. We just came back from a retreat in Mexico this past week. That was just phenomenal. And interestingly, Cam, I was down and we were at one point we did we were in a cave playing music and with candles. It was beautiful, and just having kind of a meditation music ceremony. And I was thinking to myself, it is just so wrong that we have to, as Americans, that many of us have to travel out of the country and work with people we don't know. Again, that wasn't our case, to explore consciousness, that we
Mm-hmm.
are not mature enough as a country to just say, okay, I get it. I get this is how this is. We need to have these in addition to the medical model, but that it's still forced underground. And when things are forced underground, challenges occur. We all don't get to benefit from the things that happen when things are above ground.
Mm-hmm.
But but I love Sacred Path. I love being part of a community building. I love that it's peer to peer spiritual support. It's not hierarchical. It's not dogmatic. We're not telling you what to believe or how to feel. It's just you get to do your work in a safe of a container as we know how to create.
Yeah.
And if you
So
have
with
a beautiful experience, that's on you. Great. And if you have a challenging experience, that's on you. But we are doing everything we can to reduce the physical risk coming in, and to give you an environment with trained facilitators and expert musicians, so that you can have the best possible experience you can have. But whatever experience you have, that's your experience.
how did you end up getting involved with Sacred Path to begin with?
It was an organic growth. We I started learning more and more about psychedelic churches and how they're being formed. I just didn't know this existed. I thought first came out of it was like, oh, there's either the medical model or the quote underground model. What then I didn't understand was that there were and have been for, I was going to say decades, but really hundreds and hundreds of years, people who get together as a sacred uh, communion, and they ingest these medicines. So thinking about it, thinking about this part of the country, thinking about the people who I'm in contact with who might not resonate with a medical model, and myself, I don't resonate with the medical model. For me personally, um, this just made sense, and then I started understanding how these can be structured to be as defensible as possible. In a culture where we don't have a reasonable path for a DEA exemption, so all these churches are doing the best that they can to be defensible. And we're all, I think, hoping that there is a way that we can come out and say, okay, this is what we're doing and how we're doing it, and get a sanction. Okay, you're allowed to do this work. But right now, there just isn't really an option in America for an exemption really reasonable one for a church to do. But I'm hoping
So
that
the
changes.
churches are still not technically allowed to offer these substances to people, or is it like some weird loophole that's like it's kind of allowed but not really? Like what exactly allows these churches to operate even the way that they do today?
The churches believe that we're in a country that was founded on religious freedom. We're baked into our constitutions. The government should not prohibit the freedom of expression when it comes to religion,
Mhm.
and put unreasonable restraints on that. That's at most state levels, and it's certainly at a national level. So most churches are saying we're protected by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, by our Constitution, state and federal, and that we have the right to ingest these medicines under a religious context. Um, that's so most churches would say, yeah, we're legal. We just don't have a approval from the government.
Mhm.
There has been the DEA has a thing called a DEA exemption, which you can ask for, but they've never given one voluntarily. There's
Got it.
a Native American church that has it, a couple ayahuasca churches, but they had to sue and sue and sue and sue and spend incredible amounts of money to get those. Again, we're all hoping that the DEA changes the process, recognizes that these are not being used to hurt people. They're not being used recreationally, even whether I have a problem with that or not doesn't matter. That in the sacred space, that's not what's happening, and
Yeah.
that they truly are, and they're not being used under a pseudo medical model. These churches aren't saying, "Oh, we can take your depression, anxiety, and we're going to make all these promises." No, this is where you can explore your consciousness and do your own work, whatever that is for you.
Mhm. And if that happens to be a side effect, then so be it.
Good for you. I mean, yeah, it's a side effect of the Catholic Church, and every other church talks about this is
Mhm.
your journey, your path, your how do you become a whole human.
Mhm.
This is just another tool to do that, but it's a central tool, and that's the difference between this. It's not a nice to have. There's
Mhm.
it's an essential tool that's part of this religious practice to connect with your sacred and remember who you are.
Did you grow up believing in God?
I had a Jewish father and a Catholic mother. Neither were particularly religious, but had both kind of traditions growing up. Um, I loved the music. I sang in a Lutheran church all through high school. I sang in choir in college. But no, I did not have a strong religious background. And then when all those people who I was close to died, I gave up on God. I said, there is no God. I was I've read Hitchens' God is Not Great twice. I actually found that my version with my notes in it recently, and I was laughing at myself because in that very first psychedelic instance, I realized that we're not alone, that we are all connected, that there is of course, there is a sacred. And it was a complete 180-degree reversal for me. And now I look forward to these moments of community and communion with the psychedelics, and using that again as a tool that complements for me, a full practice of other items, of other mindfulness practices, of meditation and of yoga, and of just being more time in nature. But it was a huge shift for me. What about you? Did you grow up believing in God?
No, I grew up with a Jewish background. Both of my parents were Jewish. I did Hebrew school. I had a bar mitzvah, but I never truly like believed in God. Um, Pretty much once I had my bar mitzvah at 13, I was like, cool, done with this.
Hmm.
I'm always culturally Jewish, so I always consider myself Jewish. I still consider myself Jewish, but religiously speaking, I was never that into religion. Um, and it definitely was not my first psychedelic experiences that, flipped me on that. But um, I'd say that it was my ayahuasca experience that truly drilled it in like, okay, there's something. I don't know what it is, but I can no longer. I don't think I ever really called myself an atheist. I think I always consider myself agnostic, but I just didn't care. And once I had that experience, I was more like, okay, now I am spiritual, not religious, but I do believe in God, the universe, source, oneness, whole, it's all the same. It's all a different word to get to the same thing. Um, and I very much do believe in that. And it's just because of my felt experience. It's a knowing, it's not a believing anymore, if that makes sense.
Makes complete sense, and it's a personal knowing.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
don't care if people understand. Like
yeah, it
I
doesn't make a
genuinely don't.
difference. It's up
And
to
that's
everybody can make their own choices, and I don't need to convince anybody of anything. Um, and that's okay. But I do know, just like it sounds like you know, that there's more to this than just these X amount of years that we have on this planet.
hmm I do agree with that. And it definitely gives me peace of mind knowing that. Just, knowing that this isn't it. Like this is just fun. We just get to be here, and like we're supposed to be here to have fun. And that then brings me down a lot of these thought paths of like, it's so unfortunate that the way that our society has been built has convinced us otherwise, has convinced us that we need to be working and providing value to this completely made up system in order to feel any sort of self-worth. Because growing up, obviously, in our society, the way that we're taught in public schools, like, we're taught that capitalism just is it. Like, this is the thing. This is how society is. We're not necessarily taught into as much detail as I would have liked that this is a completely made up system that just happens to sort of work, but like, just as much of as it's a made up system, we can make up another one. Like, there's nothing locking us in place here. And that's what is just genuinely unfortunate about the way that so many people are raised. Is you don't really realize that. And it really did. It took psychedelics for me to truly realize, like, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, I can choose to live differently. I still love America. I don't want to make it seem like I'm just ragging on it, like, fuck this place, because absolutely not. I believe in a country of people that created a system for the betterment of themselves, because the old system didn't work, of having a king and a ruler over, across an entire ocean. So we made a new system, and now I think we're in uh, a time period, and we have an opportunity to create another system that hopefully works better with all of the information that we now have, with all of the connectedness. I wrote about this today in my newsletter that I put out, but like, we're in a society where we're the most connected we ever had, but yet the most isolated I think we've also ever been. So many people feel so isolated and so alone, yet we truly have the opportunity to connect with anybody in the world if we want to. And I mean, that's just a complete miss on society if that's what we've created.
I totally get that. Yeah, we're brought up in a scarcity culture and a scarcity mindset. We've got to fight for what's ours. You've got to take what's yours. Others are going to take it. There's not enough type of mentality. You've got to produce. You've got to produce more. You've got to be better than. It's not enough to have a 4.0. It's what's your class rank.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is competitive very, very early on. Versus, it's an abundant world. There's plenty of food for everybody. There's plenty of shelter for everybody. We don't have to do anything to be worthy of love and to be able to give love. It's just a different mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and it is, by all metrics, the best time ever to be alive. Violence is down, famine is down, disease is down, and it's a transition period. We're seeing it happen. We're seeing loneliness, depression, anxiety on the rise. But we're also seeing more and more people having access to these tools. We're seeing more and more people becoming awake with these tools. We're seeing more and more people um, with really good intentions when it comes to empathy, just maybe using it in a violent manner and not yet figuring out how
Mm-hmm.
to be truly empathetic, um, which is fascinating. We're seeing a generation that cares a lot about fairness and equity, and trying to figure out how do they do that when maybe not, and not overdo it, and not destroy freedom of speech, and
Hmm.
not how to look outward and want outward change, but also to look inward and say, I still have a choice of how I hear how somebody addresses me, or how I choose to process the language that someone else uses,
Hmm.
or how I feel about how I choose to process what someone else says, and that their opinion doesn't hurt me. It's just their opinion.
Yeah. I remember thinking after I had my spiritual awakening was, all of the external things that I wanted to fix with my life. And this goes for not just me, but I think like as society, as we're thinking of how do we fix society's issues and how do we create more equity and create more fairness in the world. But it was with myself specifically, the way that I fixed the external factors was by going in and
Mm-hmm.
fixing all of the internal factors. And then all of the external factors were just going to fall into place. Like it was just a genuine, again, back to like the word knowing, it was trusting that it felt like that was right, and it still does feel like that's right. Is if I just go in enough and fix all of the internal things, the external things will figure themselves out. And I believe that with society, and that's why I think I'm so passionate about psychedelics too. Is if we get enough people to want to fix the inward stuff, the external issues that society has, we're going to find enough people to figure it out. But it starts with going inward. It can't start with everybody being like, okay, let's look at the issues in society and try to tick them off one by one. Like we have to go inward first.
Yeah, because if we do it the other way, we are just trying to change things without truly changing ourselves.
Yeah,
It
it's there's
has to
still so
start
much
with each
ego
individual.
involved.
Exactly. And I think there is a risk in this space of I mean, there's a term. I mean, psychedelic narcissism. It's like, oh, I've got
Mm-hmm.
all the answers and I know better than you. I know what's right. And that is really a dangerous position for anyone to take, let alone a guide or a facilitator. Um, the desire to help, it can be beautiful, um, but it can also be just another mask of, I'm not really willing to do the work myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's another way that we talk about the types of selfishness. There's selfishness. There's things that you do for yourself to make yourself feel good. That's a type of selfishness, of course. And there's things you do for others to make yourself feel good. It's a refined taste, maybe, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the same selfishness. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do we, again, at our cores, find our strength, find our love, find our confidence, really then operate from that point versus from a place of hurt and a place of unresolved trauma and unresolved um, uh, longing. And
Yeah.
we getting to that strength place makes everything else we do more effective.
I think that you have to be a little selfish in order to be truly selfless. Like it starts with being selfish, and but like not in the sense of like, oh, me, but like setting boundaries and taking the time for yourself to do that internal work. Like that can be selfish. There were people that I had to
There
say
is no
no
can
to.
be. It
Yeah.
is selfish, and
Yeah.
there is no such thing as selfless. It doesn't exist. It's just a different. It doesn't exist.
Hmm.
You can do things that are good for others, but it's also good for you. And when we think it's not good for us, that's the ego coming through. We think, oh, I'm doing this. I'm going to jump on this grenade to save who? To save your people, your friends. It's going to make you feel good. It's going to make your estimate. You want to change the way that people look at you.
Hmm.
But there's nothing that we do that is selfless. Where we know we're doing it uh, for selfless purposes.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that way of looking at it. Um, but just the way that we're taught about obviously those two terms put one
Mm-hmm.
in a very positive light and one in a very negative light, when in reality, again, nothing's ever black and white.
No, we do that all over in our culture. We do that with different behaviors. Oh, well, this poor person, oh, they're depressed. They can't get out of bed. Oh, that's so bad. But no one says, oh, this maniac who's working nonstop and is on the cover of Fortune magazine. That person has challenges. No one's poor personing that person. oh, this poor drug user is using drugs to escape, and oh, that's awful. But we don't say that as much about, you can go drink yourself silly at the local
Hmm.
bar, and no one's saying, oh, they're using alcohol to escape, that poor person. We don't, we are, or eating to escape, or gambling to escape. We don't do that. Um, and it's again, just, it's the culture. It's the culture.
Yeah.
Um,
We're
and we were,
almost taught to use alcohol to escape. Like I mean, I've yeah, I don't not drink anymore completely, but like my drinking has gone down significantly,
mhm.
significantly since that ayahuasca trip. And it like I subconsciously I realized I had been using alcohol to escape this whole time. It was never my conscious decision of like this is what I'm doing, but like it was I had nothing else to do. Like this is how I'm going to pass the time, and I don't want to and I don't want to deal with those inner things. Like I don't want to have to sit alone with my thoughts. That sounds fucking terrible. So if I drink alcohol, I don't have to do that.
Yeah, and it's so okay in our culture. Everywhere
Hmm.
we look, it's, I mean, and it used to, and again, much more so. Is it getting better than it used to be? Sure. I mean, it used to be billboards and magazines and advertisements all the time of the attractive people in the bar, again, drinking. You want to be a part of this. Um, but I think it was the wise guru Seth Rogen who said, um, "Can you imagine? Like, what's the sales pitch? You're gonna drink this medicine, and for an hour you're gonna feel amazing, and then for 2 hours it's gonna get kind of foggy, and then you're gonna forget everything else that happens, and then you're gonna wake up the next day and feel like shit, and that's the medicine of choice. And you might drive in between and kill somebody. Um, this is the thing that's legal in our culture. This is the thing that, and tobacco. It's not a, cigarettes aren't, it's not tobacco like they use in indigenous cultures
No,
where
it's
it's
not
no, it's
like our
4,000 chemicals mixed
yeah.
together and you're doing it and it's magnifying your thoughts because you're doing it in between work breaks and,
Hmm.
it's not this. It's just, it's again, legal doesn't make it okay.
No, no, it does not, and it is just very unfortunate that we think so. So I want to ask, what's your since you've gone down this psychedelic path, what's it been like for adjusting you and your family to this life as well? Because obviously it's not something you want to force onto people, but I'm just curious what that's been like.
Yeah, I mean, first, it is for me. It is certainly not something I want to force on anybody, including in my family. I am lucky, and in a strange set of coincidences, I have a cousin who is deep in this work, Ali Schaefer, with Into the
Super mush
Multiverse. Yep,
or
Super Mush
yeah.
products and Microdosing Collective. So she's my cousin. Her mom. Yeah, we were at a beach week and we were talking about psychedelics, and she's like, "Oh my god, you've got to see what Allie's doing!" And so it's amazing that she's doing that work. I am definitely a better father. I'm a better husband. I'm a better brother since going on this path. And I can support my family in ways that I couldn't. I could always provide, Cam. I'm a good provider. I can scramble to earn money from all sorts of different ways. What I was an absentee dad. I mean, for
So you're a good
four,
provider physically.
physically, yeah, I can provide a house, I can feed you, I
Hmm.
can send you to private school. You get to go to college, yay! But I was gone a lot of my kids' childhood. Childhoods, plural. One point, I owned one business that I was running from North Carolina, and I had an equity stake in another business in Miami, and I was gone like 3 nights a week building this other business, just trying to provide. And then even after we sold that business, I stayed on for I think 2 years as a consultant.
Hmm.
Again, just I don't know. It was yeah. I can see now that my kids didn't want if I could give them a choice between more time with me or more things, they absolutely would have chosen more time with me.
Hmm.
And I didn't see that clearly then, but I do now. And it is what it is. I can't change the past. And all of that led to this moment, but I definitely am a more emotionally available person today than I was then. Um,
It's
what about you? Has it
interesting
changed your family dynamics?
a little bit. They're I mean, more so just the fact that like I feel a lot more comfortable being me and
Mm-hmm.
talking about these things around them. Whereas before, like, I didn't tell them shit. Like, I told them the absolute bare minimum that I possibly could, because I mean, I felt like I was sort of, under a mic, like all of everything I did was always being questioned. Like, why are you doing this? Like, what's the point of this? What's the thought behind this? Whereas psychedelics taught me, like, there doesn't need to be a fucking reason behind everything. I just want to do it because I want to do it. So, um, it's made me more comfortable with that, but it's given me a lot of empathy towards looking at them and seeing the choices that they make. And like, our parents are going to fuck us up. Like, I know when, if I eventually have kids, like, there's no getting past that. They're going to have trauma. There's no way that I can prevent that. And so it's understanding that that's going to happen, and still just being like, I'm doing the best that I can. I can look back and at my parents and see that they were just doing the best that they could. And they did love me. They always loved me. They still love me. But there were, I never really felt emotionally safe when I was growing up. I never felt safe to truly express myself and, my true needs and be a genuine individual. I wanted to fit the mold that they had created in order to receive as much of their love as possible, because that's all I wanted at the end of the day, was just to be loved. But I ended up creating this whole persona in order to be loved and receive their love that wasn't actually me. So I was sacrificing part of myself in order to receive that love. And that's not their fault. That's my fault. Not that it's, again, I didn't know any better.
And
It's all
fault too.
happening.
Yeah,
It's all happening
faults.
subconsciously.
And fault's a tricky word to use. Like, we can talk. I like responsibility.
Yeah, I take
It takes
responsibility for it.
responsibility.
I don't beat myself up for it. Like, it's, I give
No bad
myself the
you.
grace, grace that I need to. I didn't know any better either. So, but it's important to take responsibility for those things and realize that, it's my responsibility now to reparent the parts of myself that I feel need reparenting. And psychedelics help me do that a lot.
Well, and that's the taking back of agency. So
Mm-hmm.
we as kids, we give our agency up to our parents, we give it up to our teachers, we give it up to our doctors. Part of the psychedelic journey is saying, okay, though they're not responsible for me, and they can't change the way I feel on the inside. I'm only responsible for this. Um, and yeah, take that power back is a huge message that I've received over and over and over again. And it's fascinating to me to look at all the different places where I've invented characters in my movie, who I was like, oh, they've taken my power away. No, they didn't. No, they did not. Well, they shouldn't have talked to me that way, or they treated me. No, they can talk to you any way they want.
Mm-hmm.
You heard it. You created that scene. You have a role in that scene. You're 100% responsible for everything in your life. It's okay. No
We're the
bad
ones that
anybody.
choose to give things that happen meaning. And we
Yes.
are making that choice consciously or subconsciously every time something happens to us. How much meaning do I want to give this? This person cuts me off in traffic. How much meaning do I want to give to that person personally offending me for doing that? My dad was always, at any time people would be bad drivers, he would get terrible road rage. And just like, it would affect him so personally. And that's how I learned to drive, though. Is like, when I first started driving, I was kind of the same way. Like, if people would be dick drivers, I'd be a dick right back to them. As I got older, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be fucking around in a 4,000-pound car, and that's incredibly dangerous. Like, just let it go. I can choose to do that. But like, when you're taught a certain way and it's been ingrained in you, you don't always realize that you have that choice.
And that's and all of that's okay. So we all have our programming, and again, whatever the process is for each individual to become aware of the programming begins the process of unlearning the programming and remembering that at our core we are all the same. What we do is different, but at our
Mm-hmm.
core, our essence is the same. So I'm not any better or worse than anybody, period. We are the same internally, and then we do different things. I might be not as good at baseball, or not as good as a musician, or not as good as a performer,
Mm-hmm.
but at the things that matter, we're all the same.
Yeah. It's a shame that we forget that
Mm-hmm.
just because somebody is born in a completely different country and speaks a completely different language we have ways of dehumanizing them just because they're not exactly like us, but like they are humans at the end of the day. Like we are all part of the human race, and we all deserve to feel that we are supported and that we belong and that we live in community. And that's another thing, you know, this psychedelic community that I've met, people like you, people like Sophie. I think that's the biggest thing that it's given me than anything. I mean, the healing's been absolutely amazing. That's very helpful, but I now have a genuine sense of community that my Jewish upbringing did not give me,
Mm.
which is, I think, more important than any of those other factors. Is our sense of community, of knowing that there are people that have my back and people that I can rely on when shit does hit the fan. And I feel like I have that.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's a lovely thing to have. It's it is interesting. We're in a time when people are leaving the religion of birth in kind of droves, kind of all across all religions. It's down, and yet we're seeing this new community coming up. It gives me great hope that and I do think, I actually think conversely, that even through the psychedelic experiences, people may find their way back to their religion of birth and back to their communities of origin,
Mm-hmm.
and then be able to interact in that community in a different way and say,
With a
we
different
have,
perspective.
a different perspective, and bring that. And then and certainly the mystic religions have Kabbalah and Sufism and have hints of this already. But I think we will see, and we did see at the Psychedelic Science Conference. There's a whole religious track of psychedelics in Judaism and Islam and
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism, and we're seeing these other religions, people in these other religions, I should say, um, understanding that this psychedelic tool is not something that they need to be concerned of losing practitioners to. It can be a
Mm-hmm.
tool used to actually gain practitioners, and be, if they're open enough to say, you have the right and the ability to have a direct religious experience,
Mm-hmm.
and that can make you a better Christian, that can make you a
Yeah.
better Muslim. That's powerful. But I didn't grow up thinking I could have a direct religious experience. Those are stories in the book for other people, prophets
Mm-hmm.
and people with funny names.
I
Never
definitely
occurred to me.
understand religion a lot better than I used to because of my psychedelic experiences. Like now I can, when people read Bible verses and things like that, just randomly, I'm like, oh shit, like, you know what? He's kind of right.
Yeah, that's
Like
really beautiful. Right. You can say that's really beautiful. I
that's,
understand that story.
yeah, I completely get that. I know exactly where they were going with that. And he's completely right. But in the context that, again, a lot of us are taught, that it, you know, doesn't always make sense when we when we first hear it. But I would say it's given me a deeper respect
Mm.
for religion, and I think its original purpose than how it currently operates today.
Yeah, I think I conflated, gave so much power to the rules and the sacraments and the things I didn't like, whether it was the sins of the Catholic Church, or whether the people singing weirdly in church, or on and on. They're just things I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, what was Jesus really teaching? What was Muhammad really teaching? What was Buddha really teaching?
Mm-hmm.
These are beautiful, powerful lessons that have withstood the test of time. It's just the other things wrapped around it. The human command and control pieces wrapped around it that, yeah, I don't resonate with. But most of the teachings are powerful.
Yeah, and I'm yeah, I think this is something that I struggled with at the beginning, but like I think towards the beginning it felt like I was almost trying to like transcend humanity and,
Mm.
you know, be that greater wisdom Jesus Christ Buddha like figure.
Mm-hmm. How'd that work for
And
you?
not not good, but you know, now I can see all of, you know, the shit that comes with being human, and see it for actually like how beautiful it is, like that we get to have these really painful experiences, and that we get to have these incredible moments of just pure bliss and joy, and that two people that come from even the exact same background and exact same place can think so wildly different. That's part of the human experience. Like, that's so fucking cool that we can all be these unique little people that all come from the same place, which is Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and be so wildly different, just trying to do our best and figure it out.
Yeah, which at the end of the day, that's exactly where we all are.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up here, Matt.
Mm.
Before we go, is there anything that you would like to share, shout out, mention to anybody that might be listening?
I've talked about Sophie a few times. She's got a great Substack going on with really, I mean, she's just such a thoughtful writer, and she has a unique ability to be both curious and skeptical,
Mm-hmm.
which I think she brings into her reporting. So shout out to her. Yeah, I mean, I certainly feel like if people are interested in my book, Amazon, Audible, two places to get it. I have a psychedelic preparation integration journal called Beyond the Trip, and then yeah, and then I'm active at mattzemon.com. There's a guide to microdosing if people want to schedule a call to talk about speaking or spiritual practices or any of those types of things. I'm always willing to get to know somebody and extend the conversation and give the share what I know and what my experience has been. If that helps someone their journey, happy to do it.
And you're very good at getting to know people and creating that safe environment, speaking from experience.
Oh, I appreciate that. So you've had a just before you wrap, just give me the quick
Okay.
update. You've had a few months here. Your process is continuing to unfold in beautiful ways, and did you have a recent experience that was also powerful, transformative?
I did. It's, I've been, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I've been struggling with figuring out, like, how am I gonna make money to
Mm-hmm.
just live my life. When I was working in software sales, that was never the issue. Everything else was always the issue. Now it's the opposite. Now I have the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual side down, but I don't have the physical tools to know that I'm gonna continue to make it. So I've, through the podcast, meeting a lot of really great people. I also, like, I work part time at a brewery, so that's one thing I do. And then I started working with a couple of retreat centers to do their discovery and sales process and screening process,
Do you enjoy
for
that?
who we invite to their retreats. I think I do. It was getting to a point where I felt like I wasn't enjoying it because
Mm.
it gets busy. Like, it's there's a lot of people that are very, very interested in this. And at the beginning, I mean, really just this week is, and during my mushroom journey on Saturdays when I realized this, but I was trying to give my time to every single person that came through, and try, like, truly giving myself to them, sacrificing my own health in the meantime,
Mm.
not being able to meditate and set boundaries and take time off, because there's also people from all over, so the time zones are mixed up. Some people are, you know replying back to me at 10 at night, and I'm like, oh my god, let me get back to these people and try to find a time that works for both of us to talk and all that. And that's not sustainable. It's just not. So I think my journey on Saturday made me realize that if I'm not taking the time for myself, if I'm not taking that selfish time to say fuck all to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be able to truly be of service to any of these people. And so I'm in a stage right now of figuring out, what does that truly look like for me? How do I give myself the time I need while still being in a position to be of service to as many people as I can? And that's the key: as many people as I can, not everybody.
That's a good lesson in
It
figuring
is.
out how to set those boundaries. So that was the big thing that came out from the mushroom experience for you
Yeah, that was one of the big ones. It was also the first time that my partner and I had intentionally tripped together,
together.
just her and me. And that was just a really, really beautiful experience that, you know we're I think we already do a very good job of being close and checking in with each other, and I think we have a really, really beautiful and great relationship. But it helped us get just that much closer and that much deeper, and be able to say the things that we want to say, and think about how we see our lives in the context of us, where sometimes it is scary having those conversations. We haven't even been dating for a year, and so there's serious conversations that I think are fun to have, and I'm glad we were able to have them. And not only that, but in the days after, we've continued to talk and integrate together, and take from the experience what we want to take into the future of our relationship.
It's hard to compare dating time when you're on these types of paths to dating time when you're not on these paths. The type of conversation you're having is different. The type of connection is different, though. The level in which you're getting to know each other is different. For many people, including, I'd say, me, when I was, again, a million years ago dating, it was much more superficial. And a lot of the love and learnings came over the years that, had I been using this tool then, I think it would have connected us differently. So I think that's beautiful that you're doing that with your partner. And a year can be a long time in this space.
It certainly can be, but we only have now. So to bring everything full circle.
There we go. In full circle it is. Well, Cal, I'm so glad we could do this today. It was lovely getting to talk to you and with you and spend this time. Appreciate the vulnerability that you bring to these discussions. And how much you're willing to share and just open up and call it like you see it. It's beautiful.
I echo the exact same sentiments, Matt. It was truly a pleasure speaking with you at Wonderland, and it's been just as much of a pleasure being able to continue that conversation and get to know you. And so thank you so much for coming on and being willing to be vulnerable and share your story and all the work that you're doing in this space too. You use so much heart, so much love behind it, and it really shows, and I can feel that, and that's why I appreciate you so much. So I love you, brother.
No, I love you, my friend. Thank you. Look forward to more of these discussions.
Well, this is the end. Thank you for everybody who made it this far, for everybody who listens to this podcast, and truly inspires me to want to continue to do this and want to continue to do better. I think I've had a little bit of trouble lately trying to juggle everything. And this is still something that I really am grateful that I'm able to do, and that there are people that do listen to this. So thank you. If you want to get in contact with me, please feel free to shoot me a DM on social media, or send me an email, tripsittingblog@gmail.com, if you're interested in sponsoring, or if you're just interested in having a chat. I'm up for it. Thanks again, and we'll see you next episode.